views. And in the US, the problem is slightly different. There's been a sort of wholesale loss of confidence in the whole democratic system. Both the Republican side and the Democratic side think that the other side is rigging it, and it's all a scam and it's all a fraud, and you can't trust what's going on. And then at the same time, you've got this kind of gridlock that very few bills have actually come through Congress recently. It's really hard to get anything done, and so again, that's a sort of sign that the democracy is not working properly. And that is really the big test, I think, for this year. Can American democracy get through this year? Because Donald Trump's made it pretty clear that if he does win the election, then he wants to dismantle an awful lot of the things that stopped him doing what he wanted to do last time around. And he wants to put his own people in to the Department of Justice and essentially sue all of his enemies, and he wants to get rid of what he calls the deep state, which means that most, I think, people would say, well, that's the sort of usual checks and balances you get in a democracy to stop a president from doing whatever the hell they want to. So that really is the big question for this year. How's that going to go? Will American democracy survive that? And what's the implication going to be for the rest of the world? Because the consequences really are global.
Yeah, I haven't checked, but I suspect that at the beginning of 2016, The Economist didn't believe Trump would win. No one really did. Sort of the opposite this time. He's got the inside running. He's polling ahead in the key states, and
exactly, in those swing states, and it is going to come down to those swing states, and that's the really worrying thing. So when we went to press in November, we thought he had a 1 in 3 chance of winning, and we think it's now down to a 1 in 2. It really is a coin toss, and U.S. elections are very, very close. They come down to a few tens of thousands of voters in a few swing states. And that's what we saw last time. It would have been just 40,000 votes. If that had been in the other column, then Trump would have won in 2020. And that was why he was ringing people up and saying, you need to find me some votes. It really is on a knife edge, and that's what makes this very hard to predict. But it's also cast a shadow over this whole year, because that's the biggest unresolved question in geopolitics. And everyone is sort of trying to Trump-proof whatever they're doing, and trying to find ways to have insurance policies in case he wins. But it's very difficult to know what's going to happen.
Yes, and if listeners are wondering, well, why are you guys talking about America so much, we'll point out that actually the fortunes of the world do in a lot of ways depend on America. You wrote that Vladimir Putin's fate, for example, would depend more on American voters than Russian ones. It's a pretty strange position for America to be in.
It is, but that's because we know that Trump would definitely pull the plug on any support for Ukraine, and that's obviously exactly what Putin wants. But it's a whole load of things. I mean, he would pull America out of the climate agreements again. He wants to, it seems, pull out of NATO, so Europe would have to go it alone on security and would have to support Ukraine on its own. And I think the really big question is what's going to happen with Taiwan. And that seems kind of theoretical, I suppose, at the moment. Taiwan's had its election. It's elected William Lai, who's a more independence-leaning candidate. I don't think anyone's expecting a Chinese invasion of Taiwan this year, but there is this theory that the sort of logical time for China to make that move is the late 2020s, because America is putting a lot of investment into the Indo-Pacific, but that's not really going to bear fruit until the 2030s. So if you're China, you're thinking, well, maybe we should move before that. And that means that whoever is elected president at the end of this year in the US could be the president who is in the White House in the event of a conflict over Taiwan and potentially a war between America and China, and whether America would go and support Taiwan. And we honestly don't know where Donald Trump stands on this. On the one hand, he wants to be strong and wants to be tough on China, and on the other hand, he's looked at America's allies in Asia and said, well, are they paying us for this support, this military protection we give them? Why aren't they? It's like a sort of mafia protection racket is the way he sees it. And so you can just imagine him saying, well, Taiwan is a little island, no one's ever really heard of it. Who cares what happens? Maybe we should do a deal with China. We'll let them take Taiwan, and then as long as they buy lots of American soybeans or something, that we should do a deal. He's very transactional, so we honestly don't know what he would do. And I think that's the massive problem with the prospect of him coming back, that there are two very different worlds that we could find ourselves in 2025, depending on whether he wins or not.
I spoke to Dr. Hannah Ritchie yesterday. She's a data scientist at Oxford, and she describes herself as an urgent optimist when it comes to climate change. You see something slightly different. You, like her, see this big drive for clean energy, but note that we may be replacing one problem with another in the quest for the resources we need to produce clean energy, like like lithium?
Well, sort of. I'm an optimist about this too. I think that the trend is that technology to address climate change is actually developing faster than most people expect it to, and the deployment of solar energy is happening much faster than people expect. So, yeah, I think ultimately climate change gets sorted by technology developing rapidly, as much as it is sorted by, policy makers changing rules. So I think you need a bit of both of those, but I think it's the technology that's going to surprise us on the upside. But I think the theme that I'm trying to identify for this year is this shift from thinking about energy resources as where is the oil and gas, and haven't got enough access to the oil and gas. We're now shifting to this, where is the lithium, where is the nickel, where is the copper, where's the manganese and the rare earth elements and the cobalt, and they're in very, very different places from the oil and gas. And a lot of them are in the global south, and they are in countries that are not necessarily aligned with either the American or the Chinese bloc in the new Cold War that we now seem to be finding ourselves in. So I know there's one on lithium in Australia, for example, and then there's a whole load in Chile. I think people know about that. But it turns out that Ghana is just opening a lithium mine. A huge amount of lithium has just been found in the US. Nickel, well, that's sort of New Caledonia and Indonesia.